This is Morgan Freeman. If you enjoy listening to The Edge, support them by subscribing to The Edge on iTunes, Stitcher, and you can listen through the iHeartRadio app. Get busy listening.
This is The Edge.
Edge-show.com.
Edge lubricates as it lathers.
Edge-show.com.
Listen to the phone side, then listen to the Edge side.
Edge-show.com.
Phone, Edge.
Edge-show.com.
This is The Edge.
Hi, thank you for being here. Great show today. 3 conversations. We'll start with Michael Shure in the Fast 15. Michael, as I'm fond of saying, because it's true, has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. We talked to him about activism in America, and so many people are on the streets and on college campuses and making their voices heard. Does that translate, or will it translate in any kind of real political change, or is it just part of a democracy where you hear parts of the populace that are not happy with the way things are going? We'll get into that and a couple of other things. That first conversation runs about 23 minutes. Then we move into IBM Watson and artificial intelligence. Someone on the IBM Watson team will join us to talk about what IBM Watson is doing now. It's really the revolutionary way that people are connecting and interacting with computers. IBM Watson was made famous, of course, for winning in Jeopardy. And by the way, the person on the IBM Watson team has kind of a secret that's not so secret, I guess, in that her father is this high-stakes gambler. So I'm going to ask her about that, too, just because it's off point, but I just am fascinated whenever I run into somebody who knows someone who's one of those high-stakes gambling people. And his story is wild. That conversation with Nish from IBM Watson runs about 23 minutes as well. And then the last part of the show is Prisoner Jeff, a guy who went away to prison for 17 years. You'll learn why he went away, what happened when he was there in the third part of the show. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all the ways you support this show, by sharing it, by telling others about it. Your even modest financial support really makes a difference. A few of you have hit the PayPal tab and sent us $20 here and there, and that makes a difference. Nobody makes any money, of course, on this show, but it does help keep the lights on. Thanks for all your help. On with the show.
You're tuned to The Edge.
Edge-show.com.
Edge-show.com.
Time for the Fast 15. Michael Shure, everybody. Come on.
Oh, God, you're too kind.
Yeah.
Unbelievable the reception I get here.
Excited to see
I mean,
you.
I can't blame him, but it's always humbling.
It's been a long time since you've been in.
Yeah, the 15s have been slow recently.
Yeah, so there's a lot that's happened, and we want to talk to you about it. I'd like to talk to you, we kind of try to keep some sort of sense of neutrality on this show, even though, I'm obviously, I care about things that really have to do with the environment and such. I guess that makes me a lefty, and I care about things that have to do
It shouldn't make you anything, right? I mean, if you care about it should make you a human.
No, it really should be a bipartisan thing, but for some reason, I'm considered, it's become a left issue, left of center.
It hasn't really become that. The tree hugger term was labeled left probably since the 60s, maybe before that. And for some reason, when one group is labeled, it sticks. And the truth is that the people that want government to spend money on programs that benefit the environment are not usually the same as the people who don't want the government to exist at all. So it's that's where they run into they're into each other and what they want to get done.
Yeah, and I have to say that just because you mentioned it, I mean, I am for the government spending money on protecting the environment, on clean air and clean water. And I'm also for the government spending money on things like the arts. Government-sponsored arts have existed through the centuries. I mean, look at Italy. If you think all that stuff went up there just because a bunch of guys had an idea to carve a statue, that was underwritten by the government.
Of course, that's true. When you think about the amount of money that they want to spend, that they want to cut, it's a drop in the bucket. It's $146 million that they want to cut from the National Endowment to the Arts, right? And that's the Trump administration. It costs 3 times that much to protect Melania Trump alone in New York, security, police, and infrastructure to get her to and from that building.
I didn't know that. That's a great way to look at it.
3 times as much as what the NEA endowment is.
Yeah. Oh, these are truly rounding errors. And when you get down lower, You're looking at something like, I know they're talking about defunding the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Yeah.
These are things I think that are important, especially if they're critical of the government. I mean, I think it speaks well of our nation. I'm just talking about from a philosophical standpoint that our nation funds things that aren't always just flogging the position of the administration in power.
Right, yeah. And listen, with public broadcasting, whenever there's a threat of cutting it, I always think it's great for public broadcasting because they do these pledge drives, and they probably make a whole lot more because they make themselves sound like an endangered species. But the philosophy behind it is really broken.
The philosophy behind
cutting it, you know, and lowering whatever kind of endowment they get.
I really want to talk to you about the protests that have existed. But before I do, because you're kind of off on this tangent now, I mean...
Although it ties in, you know.
Yeah, and I say tangents just because I hadn't expected we get off on it. It's not really a tangent per se, but...
I thought you just liked talking about trigonometry.
I do like this question of cutting things that you can beat your chest over cutting.
Right.
It looks good because I think to a Trumpian base, it looks, he's cutting that National Endowment of the Arts, and he's cutting that crap with public broadcasting, and he's cutting that. And I know that listen, I know many people who support Trump listen to this show. Please don't be offended. I know you don't all think the same way. And I know those of us who are on the left, we don't think the same way. But having said that, it does play to his base, those who might spark to those cuts. And so it plays well in the headlines, when the truth is, as you say, from a bottom line standpoint, it really doesn't do much.
No, it doesn't do much. And not only that, it plays well as a sales pitch, but when it gets down to the people that it affects, well, those are the Trump voters. Those are the people that after the election we realized came out in droves. Those are the people that live in rural communities that need access to health care, and health care is being cut, that do not benefit from charter schools, and public education is going to be cut. So they're voting against their own best interests in a lot of those cases, yet it fulfills the sort of the smaller government philosophy that they seem to espouse, but it really does affect them, this part of it.
The other thing I would say about Trump voters, and I'm talking about those in rural areas in the industrial Northeast and even in the industrial South, I'm talking about coal country and those who have rallied for him there. The truth is that you can declare and even legislate and help and prop up all that coal country and that coal industry. But the truth is that the money is going away from coal.
Right.
There is no money in it. Coal is dying not because the government isn't supporting it anymore. It's dying because there's no money in that business anymore.
Right.
And so
it's a false promise. It's letting people think, the way of life that we've enjoyed here in West Virginia is not going to change because Donald Trump said he's going to, but it is, because the world is going to pass them by.
That's exactly right.
And that's going to hurt their children and their grandchildren, certainly more. I mean, I sound like a politician now, but it will hurt their descendants much more than it will, or descendants, not decedents. They'll be fine.
I used to live in Buffalo, New York, and I'd drive through Lackawanna. Lackawanna is the steel part of Western New York. And it was a shell of itself. It had already passed. The steel industry had already passed. Once a vibrant part of Western New York life. I mean, they were robber barons virtually. There was so much money. And once it leaves, it's not coming back. I don't care who's the president.
That's absolutely right. I mean, and bigger cities have tried to reinvent themselves. Birmingham, Alabama, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, tried to bring in tech, tried to bring in support hardware, the hardware to the technical industry in Birmingham, Alabama. So they try and reinvent themselves. The ones that lose are the ones that hold on to the last plant. As awful as that is, because I have a soft spot for that stuff. You know, I'd love to see the mom and pop industries stay open, and the stores, and certainly things that have this fabulous history like the steel industry.
And I also like to see working class people who really work for a living. I like to see them sustained by our economy. I want that also. And listen, there's sort of an inexorable flow of money away from those industries. What Trump and his new crew can do and are doing is you can dismantle the Environmental Protection Agency. You can remove those protections that there are for clean air and clean water, and they've already done it. You can allow oil companies to dump anything, literally oil, chemicals, poisons, whatever, into
the
water
light,
supplies.
the light ends of crude oil. I mean, it just goes deeper and deeper.
And so that has now been done with the stroke of a pen. So I don't know that that's going to help the economy, but I do know that once you destroy a water supply, you can destroy it for all time. It's oftentimes destroyed forever. So these are things I feel strongly about. But let's get away from that for a second. And I want to ask you about this sense of activism that I'm seeing. You know, it reminds me a little bit of what was going on during the Vietnam War. You saw people on campuses constantly assembling. You saw people around federal buildings across the country assembling. There is this sense of anger and protest, and I think it has been perverted by those like on the Berkeley campus who wanted to destroy those buildings. That was awful. But there are almost daily protests now somewhere in the country.
Yeah.
What I'm going to ask you, Michael Shure, I mean, you're an expert in politics and you understand politics. I don't know that all that protest gets you anything, or does it get you something? And in the next election cycle, I'm not talking presidential elections, I'm talking about local elections.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, the spirit of protest runs deep in America. America exists because it was a protest, right? It was a protest for religious freedom. It was a protest to taxation, all of that. So protest does work in that regard. Does it change things immediately? Usually not. It usually takes a minute, even in its quickest forms. So, the civil rights movement was a protest throughout the 60s. It was constantly protesting and sitting in and marching. That worked. I mean, it got rid of it got people the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. That created change. It can be argued, even though it took a very long time for the Vietnam War to end, that the protests ultimately resonated. Certainly with people around Nixon, certainly with people even, with Gerald Ford. Those things happen. But is this wave of protest that we're seeing now going to make change? Well, when it comes to electoral politics, that change happens not necessarily because the protests are happening, but because the election happens and the voting happens. So it works in tandem with that. However, these people are being held to the fire right now. And what the protests that are going on at these town halls around the country, when senators and congresspeople are going back into their districts, they're hearing this. But more than anything, this is to try and get some Republicans, to begin to turn against Donald Trump. And that can have an effect, because when they see that their livelihoods are endangered, these elected officials, that's when it matters to them.
There was an article in the New York Times. I want to
Heard of it.
It was today, and it was about how liberals are actually hurting their own case. It was an op-ed piece, I think.
Yeah.
And it was about how this liberal backbeat of anti-Trump hurts those who are on the fence. You made me think of it because you said it's about, you were talking about the Republicans who can come over. Because the liberals, it's argued, when you so demonize those who have supported Trump, you scare them back into redness, if you will.
Listen, there's always going to be the person who says that. It's a provocative case to make, right? That you're hurting yourself. People are offended by it. People don't want to associate with it. I don't believe that. I don't, because I think that people want to be awakened. And the same people that were seduced by Trump can very easily be seduced by the fact that something else is better. Or I don't want to be part of a club where everybody's loving this guy when so many people are hating him or his politics. I don't know that there's a way to keep statistics on that. And I'm certain that, yes, the liberals are pissing some people off, but I don't think it's having that effect universally. I think that's much more anecdotal than actually, turning everything against them. They lost already, right? How much worse can it get, a lot of people think? How can they lose the Senate and the House again? How can they lose the White House again? No. They want to tell people who are elected that they're pissed off. And the best way to do that is through peaceful protests.
Has the recent history of protest led to any change?
That's a great question. I think that when you look at the Tea Party and what they did to the Republicans, this is it's hard to talk about this without saying, and I don't mean to be glib about it, that it's a takeoff from that. That worked, right? That changed the party and the people. And I think that these sorts of protests, when they're done right, when there is a massive, disagreement with the administration and the way the politics as usual are, that works. It may not work in an enduring way. The Tea Party did or didn't, depending on if you look at Trump as the ultimate victory of the Tea Party, then wow, it did an unbelievable thing. But if you think that they made promises they weren't able to keep and people started running away from the Tea Party because Tea Party candidates were losing, then it was a failure. But it certainly worked. The protests certainly worked, and they were everywhere in the elections that came out of the Tea Party in 2010.
They talk about a fixed election and all this kind of thing. I feel the real fixing of elections, of course, has to do with gerrymandering. Now, is there a way to win again if you're a Democrat?
Yeah, I do think there's a way to win again. I mean, I'd be foolish to say that there isn't, because gerrymandering works in both ways.
Both ways,
yes.
of course.
So, if you have enough governors and there's a changing tide and people are turned off of politics, they're going to go for the other party, and that's just the cycle of politics. So, yeah, there's a way to do it. The question is there a cure for gerrymandering, and can that ever be changed? And people have tried to think and propose different ways of doing it. I don't have a cure, but certainly that's where the problem is. Not a question of, is it going to shut one party out forever? Because that's not going to happen. It's going to be cyclical.
The election process in the United States of America is screwed up, isn't it?
Yeah, it's arcane. It's screwed up. People don't relate to it, and people aren't active with it. They don't think that it matters, and the Electoral College has skewed it. And one of the things that, people talk about getting rid of the Electoral College, and you and I have talked about it a lot. If you get rid of it, people will think that their vote matters less. And that's a bad thing. That is a psychological negative.
Why will they think their vote matters less?
Because let's say, for example,
their vote will matter less in the middle of the country.
Well, let's say, but in terms of, let's say you're in a close electoral state like Florida, right? The massive numbers will be affected by Florida. But if you can be a small part in a big race, a close race electorally, your one vote matters a lot more in a small election, which is a state election during a presidential election. Do you follow? What I mean is your interest. You feel like you have more of an effect because you could help your state win, your Democratic candidate in Wisconsin or Ohio or wherever it is, where if you're voting in Ohio in an election that's going to be 60 million voters, right? You're not going to feel it as much. You're not going to feel as much of a part of it. If you're voting especially in Alaska or in New Mexico or states that are with smaller populations, just you don't matter as much.
All right. I mean, listen, it sounds to me like so many things in this what I think is a broken system. But I mean, when I say broken system, I mean there are many things in the system that are broken.
Yeah.
We had this conversation before the election. I told you I wasn't a fan of the Electoral College. This is before the election.
Yeah.
I also told you I'm not a fan of the way congressional seats are distributed.
Right.
The representation is disproportionate. So
in the Senate, certainly, and in the presidency, not necessarily in the House.
Okay, there's an argument anyway in the House.
Yeah.
But in the spirit then of the Electoral College, I would say, if you want to keep it, you have to make it more proportional.
Yeah, you do. I don't disagree.
But tell me who's going to open up the hood on that?
It's not a sexy thing right now, and it's not a priority.
If you're the Republicans, you've just
But if it's going to happen, it's got to happen.
Democrats, you have no power.
Yeah, it's going to have to happen with both houses of Congress on one side. So if Hillary Clinton lost the popular vote and won the electoral vote, you would have seen a lot more action toward getting rid of the college than you do right now, because the Democrats, no matter how they feel about it, they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to introduce amendment after amendment after amendment. It's not going to go anywhere now.
Why do I feel like the Republicans really determine agenda in the media more than the Democrats? Democrats seem like they're always on the defensive addressing Republican allegations.
Well, for one reason is that the Republicans, generally speaking, march in lockstep with one another. People talk about the big tent party and however you want to label it. There are more differences of opinions among Democrats than there are among Republicans.
I always say the Democrats eat their young. And what I mean by that is, and you found this with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Look at Donald Trump right now. Donald Trump's doing a lot of things that a lot of Republicans are going, geez, I can't believe he's doing that. I can't believe he's saying that. Oh, my God, that's awful. They're rolling their eyes. They're doing it, but you don't hear anything from them. In the run-up to the general election, there were a lot of Democrats who were not big fans of Hillary. She was a tool of Wall Street. She was all of these things that they didn't really feel they could be behind, and they were much more behind Bernie.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean when I say eating their young.
I guess. I mean, I don't agree, but I see the point. First of all, listen, so many Democrats right now realize that they would much rather be complaining that there are a couple of corporate, figures in Hillary Clinton's cabinet than what we're looking at now in America. And that they would love to have that be their biggest complaint. I think that it was an unusual year. There was a serious primary to a presumed candidate. That's kind of just changed the zeitgeist of this election. But in terms of what the Democrats do better or worse than the Republicans, the Democrats don't play hardball as much. The Republicans do. The Democrats stay unified. The Republicans don't stay unified. The Republicans do. However, this administration, the Trump administration, is going to run into trouble not because of Democrats. They're going to run into trouble when a couple of Republicans start moving away. 9 to 15 months, that's going to happen.
We always like during this Fast 15 with Michael Shure to get into something that's not related to politics, and there was this. Both noticed this story. The Michelin Guide people, they're the ones who rate restaurants around the world.
From 0 to 3 stars.
Yeah.
And we don't think about it here. We have Yelp, right?
Yeah.
And
it
reviews.
is really more of a European
It
thing.
is in France, it is everything, right?
Yeah.
But it is more of a European, and I would argue Japanese as well. But yeah, it's not as big here. But you have to understand how massive its importance is in the restaurant business.
And so if you're in France and you get that Michelin star to give you a 3-star rating.
Or a 1 star. No, just 1 star.
1 star is a big
deal.
deal.
1 star is a big deal. To get a Michelin star is extraordinary.
Well, you can imagine how excited then this bistro, Le Bouche à Oreille in Bourges, it's a small city in central France, how excited they were to get a Michelin star. There's only one problem. There's nothing about this place that would suggest it should get a Michelin star, and that's not our opinion. That's the opinion of the people who run the place.
Who own it? Mrs. Jacquette?
Yes. They say, look, this is a lunch-only bistro. We've got 20 tables and a clientele mostly of local workers. The cook works part-time, and this is a beer joint, really. I mean, in fact, Mrs. Jacquet, who is the other member of the staff, she's the owner, his wife, she, in between serving customers, runs behind the bar to pour pints of beer. So she's like bartending and...
Yeah, which you don't typically find in a Michelin-starred restaurant.
And they got this star because the Michelin Guide, released in 2017, made a mistake.
Right.
And they have the wrong bouche à oreille.
Hard to believe there would be another, but yeah, there is. And on a similarly named street, too.
It was intended for a restaurant of the same name, southwest of Paris.
And one of them is on Rue de la Chapelle, and the other is on Avenue de la Chapelle.
Yes, so you can see why the mistake.
Yeah.
And a spokesman for Michelin says, of course, we do not like to make mistakes, but to err is human. But the little bistro in Le Bouche à Oreille in Bourges is overrun with people.
Right. The business has never been so good since they got the false Michelin star. It's just great when these things happen, and it makes us think about, ratings and reviews, and because the people that went there probably thought, oh, this is delicious, right?
Yeah, this is no wonder it got a Michelin star.
Right. And we're such slaves to opinion.
It's so unpretentious. I
Right.
love it here.
If I ran Michelin, I would do this to one restaurant a year for no reason, just to show, almost like the placebo effect, right? To show that these people are lemmings. They'll just follow and go and say they enjoy it because they need to enjoy it. That's not across the board. But I bet that this restaurant, people walked out of there and said, oh, mon Dieu, this is really, really good.
Michael Shure, if Michelin rated an analyst, you would get all 3 stars.
That's a mistake, folks. That's a mistake.
Michael Shure with the Fast 15, everybody.
You're too kind. You are too kind. Always.
Michael, wow.
Great to be here. This audience, too kind.
Our guest is Nish Parekh, and she's with IBM Watson. Welcome, Nish.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Before we even get into the IBM Watson stuff and the artificial intelligence stuff, I've learned something about you. Is it true that your father is a high-rolling gambler?
He is. He is.
I didn't want to include that in the conversation, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, you can include it. I don't mind.
Okay, cool. You know, you always hear about these guys who they send a plane for, or they put them in a suite.
That's him.
Really?
Yeah, many times. Yeah, he mostly plays baccarat.
Baccarat is the game of James Bond.
It is in south of France. This is true.
Now, did you see him gamble all over the world playing baccarat?
I haven't seen him all over the world. He has traveled around the world to gamble. I've mostly seen him play in Vegas, in tournaments, as well as Louisiana and Mississippi. He went to a few Super Bowls maybe 3 years ago. The Super Bowl was in Indianapolis. You know, they flew him out there. There's casinos out there. So it's more of just going to tournaments wherever they want him to go.
Is he one of those guys who will win or lose a lot of money and then his mood doesn't change that much?
Yeah, you won't know when he comes home whether he's lost or won. You'll have zero idea because you can't let it affect you, or you can't do it as a profession.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. And he really does it as a profession, huh?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You know, you do it as a profession when you have to pay taxes on it.
That's a good sign if you're paying taxes. When you were a kid, is that what he did, or did he make his money doing something else?
Well, I immigrated from India. So when I moved here, we didn't really have any money. So no, he worked just normal jobs like Walmart and fast food chains to make the family survive. So a typical coming to America story. So that's
wait a minute. An Indian immigrant worked at Walmart and at fast food chains, somehow cobbled together with a family enough money to send his kids to school and then become a high-rolling baccarat player? Why is there not a movie about this guy?
Yeah, he started. So he's a great guy. I'm very proud to be his daughter. But he came here, no English, small amount of money. We moved to New York because that's where the Statue of Liberty is and the sign of freedom. Didn't know any better. It was too cold for us. Took a megabus down to Houston. Couldn't afford plane tickets, and lived with my aunt and uncle for 5 or 6 months until we had enough money to get an apartment. I remember that apartment, Mark. We would come home every night and there was cockroaches everywhere. I mean, everywhere, every drawer you opened. So it's unforgettable. But then, you know, you work enough, and then he decided he wanted to start his own business, and he tried 2 to 10 different businesses and eventually succeeded on the 11th, and slowly started to make money off the business. And he would gamble to his means, but he loved gambling the whole time. And then as he had more money to gamble with, he started doing it more and more. And then he eventually passed the company on and just started doing gambling full time.
Unbelievable. Wow. Incredible. That's a great story. Now, most of us know IBM Watson from the Jeopardy championship that went down between Watson and all these humans, in which Watson prevailed. Now, Nish, I can't imagine that's how you really want Watson to be known, but that is how most of us know Watson.
I think it's a great introduction, though. I mean, it transformed the way we play games to start with and how we went into all these other industries. So I actually use that all the time still when I talk about Watson.
Okay, good, because then I can use it also. The whole area of artificial intelligence is so right now, and Watson is that thing that I guess defines artificial intelligence. But what do we mean when we say artificial intelligence? What does it do?
Rob, that's a very good question. When I think of artificial intelligence, I compare it to augmented intelligence, and both say AI. And it's basically looking at how computers can think like humans, and that's it. So we have subject, verbs, adjectives, pronouns. And typically when we work with Google, we don't talk in sentences or any other search engine. It's keywords. So artificial intelligence is the ability to talk in your natural language and have a computer understand it and respond.
And we're seeing more and more of that, right? Voice recognition of all sorts. But it does seem to be somehow reduced to internet searches and that kind of thing. I mean, you can't, or can you really have a conversation with one of these machines?
You absolutely can. The way that I like to describe Watson is when you first get it out of the box, it's like a 3-year-old child. You know, what is the type of conversation you can have with a 3-year-old child? And then you train your child and it becomes smarter. Same thing, you train Watson and it becomes smarter. The difference is we as humans remember 20% of what is taught to us, and nicely, computers remember 100%. So it just always gets smarter so you can have more intelligent conversations.
Now, the early days of IBM Watson, and Watson was named for the guy who started IBM, by the way.
Correct.
So in the early days of IBM Watson, I remember that it was playing chess, or I don't even know if it was called Watson then, but that the IBM Big Blue or whatever, I mean, all these
Deep
different
Blue.
names. Was that what it was? Blue? Is that what it was?
It was Deep Blue.
Deep Blue. Okay, thank you. That Deep Blue was playing chess and learning chess. Now that at the time was amazing. It was because I lived through that time when they said, for example, computers will never be able to learn chess. There are an infinite number of moves, and there's just no way that you could teach a computer how to play chess. Now, of course, chess is something you can play on every single cell phone that you can find worldwide. So clearly the technology is leaps and bounds ahead of that. But what I'm getting to is this. All those different incarnations of Watson, the chess playing Watson, the Jeopardy playing Watson, what is Watson doing now, and why is it important to us?
Well, right after Jeopardy, the very first thing we said is, what industry do we want to go into next to tackle? And the first one we went into was healthcare. So you saw the things on MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, where we're taking cancer research, ingesting all of the content that's out there from journals and articles, and then Watson is reading it, understanding it, and then being able to give insights. Because if you imagine being a doctor or an oncologist, all you know is what you've learned. But every day there's new articles and new research coming out. So Watson is that assistant to scale your expertise.
Wow, that's extraordinary. Yeah. You're saying that Watson can ingest all of that information and then advise based on it?
Exactly. So Watson ingests every article you put in it about a specific domain. So whether it's, breast cancer. And then when you have questions about breast cancer, Watson's your expert so that you can give the best advice to your patient.
Then Watson becomes a companion element in a lot of different industries, I would think. Healthcare, obviously a life and death business, but there must be other industries that can also use that same sort of skill.
Absolutely. Started with healthcare, and now, over 26, 30 different industries that we're in. Marketing is a big one. It's used quite a bit in commerce. I've had it used in wine applications where, matching wine portfolios and taste profiles to what you should buy at the grocery store. So it has very creative and unique ways to show itself. I think the thing that's really important to know here is Watson is very domain specific. So you can train it in any certain domain, in any industry, as long as you feed it the right information.
I'll get to a bigger question about Watson and AI in a second. But just to follow this out, you mentioned marketing. So Watson is able to look at the profile of a bunch of users of something and then tell businesses how they can best program their business to appeal to them, that kind of thing?
All sorts of marketing. Marketing is such a broad category. You can use Watson. So like Influential Network, they use Watson from a marketing standpoint where they basically look at influencers that are out there today, and not just now looking at demographics like their age and their ethnicity, but now they're looking at their personality profile. Are they happy? Do they like to eat a certain type of food? Are they sarcastic? What's the type of audience they typically attract? And now you're matching these people to the brands that would represent them perfectly. And you're not just looking at how old this person is, again, or what ethnicity they are.
Yeah.
So it's just going beyond that structure.
Yeah. The old days, I guess you just really didn't know much about your demographic. And it's based, I guess, on oftentimes social network postings. They can tell a lot about you, right? They can tell
exactly
about your outlook and that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's something you guys are doing in conjunction with them. So it's interesting because when I'm thinking about IBM Watson, so the chess playing and the Jeopardy that we mentioned, now you've talked about practical applications. Does Watson have that sci-fi thing where Watson learns everything and then Watson reprograms everything, and before you know it, you guys are all banging on a bulletproof glass to get out of IBM because Watson's locked you in?
I would say not to that extent, but it learns, and that's a very important concept to understand. And when I say learn, think of all the different ways you can say, hi, how are you to somebody? What's up? How's it going? How's it hanging? There's just so much slang as part of our vocabulary as well as accents. And that's not something that, black and white a computer could understand. So when we say it's learning to understand that if I say, hey, what's up? It's the same thing as, hey, how are you doing? Or how's it going? And so it's learning in that aspect to look at everything around it to be able to respond and have a conversation with you.
How do you teach IBM Watson the difference between, hey, what's up, and hello, that is the response, or hi, Nish, as opposed to, well, the ceiling is up, Mark, also the lights on the ceiling. You know what I mean? Like the same way Siri answers in that sort of very literal way occasionally.
Well, let me ask you, how would you teach your niece or nephew or child that? How would you teach them that someone saying hi is the same thing as someone saying what's up?
Oh, you would probably in that interaction say, oh, they're saying hi, they're saying hello. You should, you know what I mean? You'd explain it. Same
thing. When someone says something in a different way, you tell, and if Watson responds incorrectly, you pat it on the head and say, that wasn't right. And you say, this is wrong and this is why it's wrong. And then you train it to become smarter. So the next time it says that or something similar to it, it starts to put together the nouns and the adjectives in a way where it knows that if these things are put together and strung in a certain way, that this is what its literal meaning is.
Does Watson learn at the rate of a 3-year-old, or does Watson learn at the rate of a 3-year-old times whatever?
The best example I want to give for this is when you become a doctor, you go through 12 years of education, then you go to college, right? Then you go to get your medical degree, then you have a residency, then a fellowship. By the time you actually become a specified doctor, a physician, you're probably 30. Now, Watson basically learned everything that you learned from 0 to 30 in 2 years. So that shows you the speed of how fast it's learning. People say, oh, it took 2 years to train Watson, but it took 30 years to train the doctor you're working with.
Yeah, that's from a company standpoint, is IBM Watson the calling card that they want to lead with, or is it the unseen hand of IBM? That where from a company standpoint does IBM Watson fit in? It seems like a pretty cool thing that you'd want to lead with if I were running the place.
Oh, yeah. Ginny, our CEO, she says this many times, but this is her moonshot. Watson is the moonshot of IBM. It's what's going to take it into the next century. And, IBM's reinvented itself so many times that this is just another reinvention of how it's going to keep surviving and thriving. It's a 100-year-old company. It's definitely led in many conversations. When you think about IBM now, or especially millennials, the first thing they think of is Watson. They don't even know a lot of the other products that IBM has created.
Does the IBM technology that's associated with Watson lie as proprietary technology, or is it essentially? We know that there are other AI efforts going on, but I'm wondering, is the programming of Watson special in some way, and it hasn't been duplicated and cannot be?
That's a very good question. Well, we've spent billions of dollars in research working on Watson for many years, since I would say the 1960s or 70s. I would say the very unique part about Watson that separates itself from other AI technologies is our ability to be domain specific. So what I mean by that is a lot of the other AI technologies are pre-trained, so that when you talk to them, they're already trained by that specific provider. What we do is we actually allow you to train your own data. And this is really, really important because if you go back to marketing, there's 6 different marketing companies, all perhaps doing the same thing, focusing on campaigning or segmentation to find the right markets. Now, each of them may want to train their specific system in a different way to provide results that match the mission of their company. So Watson actually allows you to create your own training modules so that every time you put your own data in, you're getting results that are very specific to your company and what you're looking for.
Wow, that's terrific. So you're saying really you build your own platform with using the Watson technology.
Exactly. You build your own platform using the tooling, then you use the actual Watson APIs to run against the just platform that you just built, trained on your data.
That's pretty cool. So the average person listening now, how are we going to see and use and be exposed to Watson? I'm guessing the answer is you're probably already being exposed to it, but I'm just curious, in what ways, where should we keep an eye out for Watson in our own lives?
It's everywhere. You use your Weather Channel app on your iPhone. If you open it today, you'll notice on the bottom there's a little symbol that says made with Watson. If you go to get your taxes done, I'm sure you saw from Super Bowl, H&R Block has embedded Watson, so it's easier for us to quickly create a case and be able to identify the right tax codes for when we submit taxes. So many of the applications on your phone that you're using today are powered by Watson. So it's happening around you. It's embedded into all the solutions that are out there. And so it may not be, like a straight and center in front of you, like an Alexa hardware, but it's embedded into all the software solutions that you're using.
And when you talk about it being used by H&R Block, that's not like a normal computer being used by H&R Block. I mean, computers have been used to help with computation and to figure stuff out for years, but you're saying that's a special kind of use that H&R Block makes of Watson.
Exactly. When you go to H&R Block and you sit down and talk to a tax specialist, what do? Like you talk about, tell me everything that's happened to you this year. Have you bought anything? Have you done any donations? You just talk. And you notice that the person behind the desk is just constantly typing or taking notes. Now, before, what they would do is, in one way or another, look through these notes and try to figure out what the right tax codes were. But now with Watson, you're just taking notes, and it can now scan that note and figure out what it is you're talking about, where it applies, what buckets of codes, and start that process for you to make it a lot faster.
Can it read longhand?
Yes, it can.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I don't know that I can read longhand anymore. It's weird. When we're so used to entering things in the phone or some kind of device that, that types it out for us, that, we seldom use longhand anymore. But when I run across longhand notes, I always go, God, now I got to transcribe those into something, Vision, right? That's part of AI. It's being able to take a picture and identify what it is you took a picture of that's not just a cat or a dog. If you need a cat or a dog, there's millions of examples of those. But you can start to think about very specific use cases where vision becomes incredibly powerful. Let's say there was a phone company that was using Watson. You could take a picture of your phone and it would know what phone it is, who the provider is, and then be able to help you on the spot because you've trained it to understand different images of different phones. So you can start to train it in these different ways. Same thing with handwriting, right? You can start to train handwriting in letters. If it's a long L versus a short L, or if your E's kind of look like A's, it starts to figure out where people tend to make mistakes and, knowing the vocabulary of the dictionary, what it could potentially be. Could you take Watson to a job site, let's say, where you're building a building or a shopping center or any kind of architectural challenge, and it could help with the planning of how you would build whatever structure you're working on?
We have a company that does that.
And that's the commercial, ladies and gentlemen. How does it work?
So the company is called Go Fetch Code. So if you just go to gofetchcode.com, it basically looks through pages of federal and tax and local codes to answer regulatory questions about what you will be building and for architectural purposes. So it helps you make sure that whatever you're building, you're meeting regulatory requirements.
That's wild. That's really wild. The technology is fascinating, and it seems it's becoming more ubiquitous in almost an exponential way. That is to say, it seems to have hit a tipping point or something where it just is exploding. And as you say, it's in all these places that I wouldn't even think of looking.
That's where the world is going. I'm pretty sure in 5 to 10 years, everything that we use will have some sort of AI in it. The Internet of Things is going to be so powerful where all our devices will be connected to each other. And we will virtually be living in a place where no matter where we walk, no matter who we talk to, no matter where we are, everything will be logged and tracked in some sort of data format.
Nish Parekh with IBM Watson. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Listen, if you like The Edge, why don't you go ahead and share the show and help them grow their audience? I bet you thought I was going to say marijuana. All right. edge-show.com.
This is The Edge.
Hello, Jeff.
Yes, speaking.
This is Mark Thompson. I'm here with Heather, who you know.
Hi.
And J. Elvis
Hi, how you
Weinstein.
doing, Heather?
Josh, who you don't know.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Now I can hear you okay. Count to 10 for me, will you please?
1, 2, 3.
Count the
4,
number of years that you did in prison.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
All
17 in a day.
Wow.
Oh, 17 in a day.
So, Jeff, welcome to The Edge. Welcome to our show.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, this is Jeff. We're not using his last name because who wants that kind of harassment? Although we have very nice people who listen to this program, but still, I just, in the interest of right.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
I don't think Jeff would mind, but maybe. I don't know.
Oh,
Jeff.
okay. Well.
It doesn't matter.
What did you go by?
Yeah, were you Paco in the joint or like?
Nope. I went by my first name, and I mean, there's a lot of people that do go in there, and if they didn't have a nickname, they try and get one.
Yeah.
You know. And
my
a lot of
nickname would be
people,
everybody's bitch.
Hey, fetal position. What's up?
So, look, you were in this, it's a federal penitentiary.
Yeah, the feds have different levels. You know, they'll start with, the highest of the highest is what they call the supermax.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the guys that don't even get a chance to see the sun or the sky. They get to see a reflection of the sun or the sky, you know. And then it goes down penitentiaries. Then they got what they call FCIs, which are supposed to be federal correctional institutions. And they have two levels of that. They have mediums and lows, and then they have the camps.
Yeah, you're saying like it feels like a summer camp almost.
Well,
yeah, not quite that probably.
There was the first place that I went to was a medium, and it was fairly new. I mean, you know, even the facilities like they had a big gym. It kind of, I felt like I was locked up in a YMCA. You know?
It's not fun to stay at the YMCA.
You know, up until they put you to work, it was like basketball, weights every day. You know, but you know, the reality is even if they locked you up in a mansion and told you that you couldn't leave and you couldn't do that, I think that's the psychologically that's the big thing. It's not that how nice the place is. It's that you can't leave, and you know you're limited in your movements and how many times you can call somebody a day, how many visits you can get, that kind of thing.
Still, I would take the mansion.
Hey, let me
tell you, there's a lot of millionaires out there that were going through hell if they were told you got to stay in your mansion, you can't leave.
That's right. Can my wife leave?
Oh, man.
Well, I want to talk to you about your time spent, and I also want to talk about the psychology of it. But first, give us a sense. Why were you locked up?
Well, I was indicted on a conspiracy, and I went to trial.
What does that mean? Conspiracy to what?
Conspiracy to distribute Schedule II narcotics, and that kind of basically means that you plan to do something with someone, and the plan doesn't have to materialize. It just has to be that you got together with somebody else, and the law sees that as really bad. Anytime two people get together and come up with a scheme, that conspiracy, whether it went through or not, they consider it a bad thing. They don't like people, you know, figuring out how to commit a crime.
Right. A guy can dream, but two guys can't.
Yeah. And it's like, let's say two guys conspired to rob a bank. Well, in that case, there has to be an overt act. Let's say you get the getaway car, you go buy the ski mask. So that overt act is what locks the conspiracy. But in a drug conspiracy, there's no overt act required.
Really? You just have to talk about it.
Yeah. All one guy has to say is, hey, listen, you want to do this? And if he happens to be Wired or Mike, and you agree, you know, the whole thing doesn't have to even take place.
Wow, that's
You've
unreal.
committed the crime of conspiracy.
So if you could be like, you just want to kind of get out of there and go, yeah, listen, let's take a meeting on that another time, you know, like talk about that another time. That could be enough to actually, for you to have committed conspiracy.
Yeah, like I'm going to give you an example. There was a guy that agreed to do a marijuana deal, and the guy that convinced him to do it actually had oregano. So the conspiracy that he was involved in was to do a marijuana deal. So he conspired to deal in marijuana, even though the drugs were not marijuana, they were fake. He still got a conspiracy for marijuana.
And that generally happens when either someone's being an informant for the cops or someone that actually is a cop.
Right. I remember when I knew it was all over for me, and because I was in the law library all the time, researching cases. It was a case, and real quick, there was an informant who got caught, and he was telling the DEA that he knew about a bunch of guys that were actually robbing drug dealers. And so the DEA said, you think that if you propose to them that you knew where there was 20 kilos of cocaine, that they would want to, maybe go rob them? And he's like, I don't know. So they wired him. He went to the guys and said, hey, he knows this drug dealer's got 20 kilos in his house. And would he agree to, if you wanted to go rob them? And when they said yes, they convicted him for conspiring to possess 20 kilos of cocaine. And this is a case that I'm reading in the law books. And the lawyer for the defendant said, Your Honor, what's to prevent the government from saying that there was 500 kilos and then thereby getting a life sentence, because they usually would sentence you on the quantity of drugs.
Right.
Sure.
So when they sentenced him to 20 kilos that never existed.
Wow.
In a house that never existed. But because they were caught on tape agreeing to do this crime of robbing drug dealers for 20 kilos, they got sentenced on the 20 kilos, and they lost their appeal.
Wow.
That's when I knew
kilos.
it was rigged.
Right. Yeah, and I can even see the conspiracy part of it holding up. But you're right. As soon as it becomes the theoretical amount,
Yeah, the imaginary stash.
Yeah, so the government doesn't look at it as whether the government looks at what was your intent. Your intent was to go possess 20 kilos of drugs, and not only that, do it by robbing. So you had a criminal intent all the way through. So in my case, there was a neighbor who actually did this whole transaction. And so I went to trial because I'm like, well, I didn't do this. And they couldn't prove that I did it. So even after the neighbor, he eventually got indicted because there was a fugitive on our case. And so when he got indicted, he pled guilty. Well, because he didn't go to trial, they just gave him, time on what he pled guilty, which was 3 kilos, which is what I went to trial for.
3 kilos of cocaine.
3 kilos of cocaine. So they sentenced him to 5 years. Okay, because I went to trial, they came up with what was called relevant conduct, and they went from 3 kilos to 10, and then they doubled everything because I went to trial. So instead of getting 5 years, it went to 10, right? Because they increased the quantity. And then because I went to trial, they increased the time. They doubled the time. And so that's how I ended up getting 20 years.
So literally, the thing that you were accused of changed when you went to trial. That's
right. I went to trial, and the Supreme Court later said that you couldn't sentence somebody on a quantity that wasn't in the indictment. That was a big thing. They said, if you're going to take somebody to trial for 3 kilos, you can only sentence them on 3 kilos. So I go to trial for 3 kilos, but when they go to sentence me, they sentence me on 10 kilos. Because at the time, they had a thing called relevant conduct. So they said, well, this conspiracy has been going on for a year, and we believe that you've been doing like a kilo a month. So they start adding all this stuff up. And before you know it, that's a lot of time. You could have went to trial for an ounce. And if they would have came up with a relevant conduct that could have, increased the quantity, then, you're risking what you thought was a 5-year sentence to get a 20-year sentence because, they're thinking, well, we could just hit them with the relevant conduct. And that's usually how they get people to plead out, because they say, if you lose, you're facing 30 years.
right. Right. So why didn't you plea out?
Because the government, after about 3 people down the line, there was a guy who apparently got like 20 kilos from a guy who got it from another guy who eventually got it from the guys that they were connecting me with. So the government was gonna charge me for all those drugs. And so when they came at me with a deal, they said, look, we're going to offer you 15 because if you lose, we're going to give you 30. And I'm like, 15 years? And so even my lawyer argued to the judge, Your Honor, where are they getting all these drug amounts? So when they told them, well, what this guy said he bought it from here, and she's like, yeah, you can't even use those because these people were buying drugs from all over the country. So we're going to throw all that out. So the deal they came at me with was based on their assumption that I was going to get 30, and they would just basically offer me half the time. So when the judge threw everything out, she allowed them to come up with 10. So
The judge, wait a minute, the judge threw everything out. It's so funny. We weren't even going to talk about your case so much, but now it's just fascinating to me. The judge, you say, threw everything out. What does that mean? What happened that made the judge throw everything out?
She threw out, on with respect to the relevant conduct, she threw out all the excessive drugs that like this party that was like fourth down the line. Apparently,
I get it. All the adding machine of calculus associated with all this extra drugs.
But then the judge said they could only offer you 10 years in a plea deal?
No, at the time, the judge's hands were pretty much tied. The person actually running the show was the United States attorney. They're the ones that even if the judge decides, like the judge has no choice but to give the mandatory minimum. That was what was in place at the time, mandatory minimum. And if the judge went under that, the U.S. attorney could appeal, and a lot of judges don't like to get overturned. That's one of the things. I knew I was in trouble because they arrested me 2 years after the fact. They said that 2 years ago, I sent some drugs that got confiscated at an airport.
How old were you when you were arrested?
I was 32.
Mm-hmm. And you had sent some drugs through the mail? Is that what happened?
No, I hadn't sent anything. What happened was the guy that I was telling you about that he eventually pleaded, he sent something through I think it was Delta Airlines in a wooden crate, and it got intercepted. So one of the guys gets arrested on an unrelated. He says, "Hey, I know about this shipment that you guys got, and it led nowhere." So then he said it was me. So when the jury asked the judge, how do we apply a possession count if this person never had possession? So here's the example the judge gave them. He said, look, attached to this charge is an aiding and abetting charge. So if these people were to go to California and ask me, hey, do you know where I can get some kilos? And I tell them no, but if you go down here and check with this guy on the corner, he might be able to help you. The judge told the jury that because I helped them, I'm responsible for any drugs they buy from that guy, whether I made money from it or not. When she said that, I was like, man, that's not a big leap to figure that I may have had something to do with it, and that's what had me worried. And that's to me that little example of really not having nothing to do except pointing somebody in the right direction was a scary thing.
That's how you knew you were cooked. How did you know the guy who sent the drugs through the mail?
He was the guy that lived behind my parents' house. He was a neighbor. I actually went to high school with him.
Uh-huh.
No, so when he finally pleaded out, and even told, the U.S. attorney that I had nothing to do with that at all. So when I was calling my lawyer, I go, hey, why am I still in jail if this guy admitted that he's the one who sent it? He says it's because of the conspiracy. So what they did was they charged me for a possession account, a conspiracy, and a conspiracy on marijuana. So the only way I would have been able to get out of prison when all this was if I was able to undo all three counts. So what the government did was they charged me with three things, and then they gave me 20 years on each count to run together. And so the only way I would be able to get out of prison is I had to have all three charges reversed. And I could only get the possession reversed with the guy testifying that I had nothing to do with it.
It was just too much of a hornet's nest of accusations for you to be able to. So you were sentenced ultimately to how long?
They gave me 20 years, which at the time was the mandatory minimum.
So 20 years. And by the way, when they give you 20 years, that has to just be devastating. I can't imagine that moment. Yeah, it was. Well, here's the thing. I probably for the first 5 or 6 years, I really believed that this was a mistake and it was going to get, overturned. And a lot of times you hear that the Supreme Court's looking at a case that will benefit you. So, you try to hang on to that hope. And, even if you did, like there was a guy there that he was locked up for 2 years, and he finally, during an appeal, he beat it and he went home. And he had 20-year sentence, So rather than kind of just be devastated about the outcome, you try and hope that something's going to change, or you spend a lot of time in the law library, researching cases, and
for me, it was, I figured like this. I go, look, if I'm here, I'm just going to study and learn as much as I can about different things that I may want to do. And, you turn around and you look and you see that 7 years has already gone by, and you're like, wow, it's as long as you stay busy, the time will go by pretty fast.
Jeez, you have such a great attitude. Wow. So you go into this place, and the place that you were in, for the most part, you were moved, I take it, based on a couple of things you said, you were moved from one place to another?
Right. I started my case is out of Atlanta. And so, they have like they got the sentencing part where you're kind of waiting, you're in like a holdover. And then you get designated. So they designated me to Sheridan, Oregon. And I'm like, but I'm not from Oregon. And they were like, yeah, but we just got to get you in the western part of the United States.
He's from California.
Oh, you're from California.
From California.
So they
the
want
case
to get you,
was in Atlanta.
So they want to get you out west for your benefit.
Yeah, they'll usually, like when I got to Sheridan, they also had a place in Terminal Island, which is in Long Beach, which was like 20 minutes from my house. And when I got up there, the case manager, she's like, well, you don't have a gang jacket. This is your first time ever being in prison. And, we usually use this place as a disciplinary for people that are like from LA, people that are gang bangers and all that. And so she's like, I'm going to put you in for a transfer to get you closer to home. So I was only in Sheridan from November to January. So I got lucky. And in February, I ended up at Terminal Island in San Pedro.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sure. I always see that exit on the freeway at Terminal Island.
Jeff, you took Con Air,
Don't ever
right?
take it, Mark. Don't ever take
Oh,
that
yeah,
exit.
yeah.
You took Con Air, right, Jeff?
I took Con Air, and it's nothing like the movie. I don't know where they got that plane from, but it's a 727, and it's
and you're
no
shackled?
stewardess.
No stewardess?
Yeah, you're shackled on the ankles and around the waist. So they usually run a chain around your waist, and then there's like a little mechanism they made where the chain goes through, and then the handcuffs kind of locks everything in.
I hear if you fly Prisoner Plus, it actually has extra legroom.
Yeah. Well.
Jeff.
Are you there with two other guys? Like you're in the center seat and there are two other guys chained to you?
No, they don't chain you together, but yeah, it's your basic 727 has 3 seats on each side. So it's a 1-aisle airplane. You have 3 seats on one side, 3 seats on the other.
The middle seat is my idea of prison. Just getting the middle seat in general, on a regular flight, a Delta flight.
Yeah.
But that plane then is filled, or there are enough guys on that it's almost completely filled with convicts.
Yeah, no, it's totally. They have a routing system where there's guys that are waiting, like they're in transit. So what they'll do is they have all these little hubs all over. Like Atlanta is one of them. So you might have a lot of guys that are going, let's say, to California from New York. So they'll fly them into Atlanta. They'll fill up Atlanta until they have enough people so that when they move, they're actually moving a full plane load of people to the next stop, which usually is like Oklahoma City. Oklahoma actually has got a facility built right on the airport.
No way.
So when you pull in, you're actually going to use the jetway to get off, and you're right into the prison. Now in Atlanta, they usually, you go in up through the back. There's a staircase in the back of the airplane. And you'll see all these guards posted up. Everybody's got their shotgun out, and yeah, so they load you under heavy security.
And what did you say about what you guys ate on that flight? Was there? I forget what you're telling me.
Yeah, it was that little. I hadn't seen those things since I was a kid. It was like a little plastic bottle of, I want to say Kool-Aid, but you probably remember they had the little aluminum foil caps, and you peel those back.
Right.
Oh yeah. Good.
That bologna, and they had a bologna sandwich, and then they had like peanut butter. Now I don't know if I was supposed to mix them or, but
you're such a good sport, Jeff.
Well, yeah. By the way, you mentioned that the guards have shotguns and stuff. I guess they don't really need shotguns. Nobody's. I guess maybe you could all run at them at one time or something, or I guess.
Well, you're not running very far because they pretty much shackle you before they, I think it's more for maybe somebody trying to plan a breakout, right?
I see.
Somebody could be coming in, and take whoever it is that they got coming. It's hard to tell when a certain person is leaving a facility because they usually shut down any kind of phone calls. So you can't say, hey, I'm leaving tomorrow. You never know. Like when I left, they'd come at like 2 o'clock in the morning and they'll tell you, pack it up, you're leaving. So at that point, nobody really knows when you're leaving. But, for security, I mean, everybody knows what that plane looks like. Even when I'm driving on the street and I'll see a bus, I know that bus is carrying federal inmates. And I'm like, oh, there goes one of them.
You were telling me you got put in solitary confinement.
Yeah. It's affectionately known as the hole, but the prison guards call it the SHU, which stands for Special Housing Unit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so how long were you there?
I was there for 6 months.
Holy shit.
Oh, my God. Okay, wait a minute. Whoa. Stop. What did you do to end up in the SHU?
Well, they when I was at the camp, I got into a little bit of a problem with one of the COs, right? So the CO I was running from him.
CO is commanding officer, or what is that?
Correctional officer.
Sorry, I don't know the
Right,
jargon, Heather.
Well, I mean.
Hey, we all watch MASH. I thought the same thing for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forget. I figured everybody watches Orange is the New Black by that time.
Okay, so you got in an argument with the correctional officer.
Right.
What was the argument about?
We were arguing about whether I wanted to be searched or not.
Wow.
And the answer is he did not
And
want to be searched.
I'm guessing you didn't want to be searched. Am I right?
No, I didn't want to be searched.
And
Now,
what
why-
we had here is
No,
a failure to communicate.
No, but why not? Because they stick their hands up your butt and stuff like that.
No.
Because
No.
he was
Okay.
going to get busted.
Yeah, let
Let me just say that in prison there's a thing called contraband, right?
Right.
And then contraband just basically means that you have something that you're not supposed to have, right? So let's just say that I didn't want him to see the contraband that I was in possession of.
Yeah.
And so I
Like,
ran,
for
and when I
example, what would
ran-
that be?
It could be anything. It could be a MP3 player. It could be cigarettes, right? Because cigarettes are not allowed.
Oh, I didn't know cigarettes are not allowed. Or a cell phone, like something like that.
Yeah, like a cell phone or like cash money, like a lot of these, especially in a camp. In a camp, there's a lot of cash money around because they don't search you like they would in a higher institution.
So what made this guy want to search you that day, that moment?
I don't know. I was real polite to him. I asked him if he was closing up the room, and he kind of got an attitude with me. He's like, "Come over here. I'm going to pat you down." That's when I thought, well, this would only go so far before I have to run.
Wow.
So I ran, and he got hurt. And so what they did was
He got hurt?
Yeah, he got hurt.
Well, how did that happen? He tripped or what?
Yeah, he tripped and hit his nose on a railing.
Wow.
He actually did because he was holding on to me. And I slid in between these railings, and he was still holding on. And then the railing was about 4 feet off the ground. So I guess when I land and he's still holding on, his like the bridge of his nose hit the bar. So they treated it like I assaulted him.
Even though he had been the one to trip. Well, you were running, I guess, but still.
Well, yeah. So I even asked him. I said, listen, if this guy was to twist his ankle running after me, it would still be the same charge, right? Because he got hurt because of me, right? They're just like, yep. And I go, all right. So this guy's trying to say that I took him and I slammed him by the head into a bar. I go, if that were the case, then I'm chasing him.
Right.
Yeah, they punished me for that. And a lot of it is, that being in the hole is like, I don't know, man. I think my eyesight got bad because I never had to look further than 6 feet away, and when I get out of there, I'm like, man, I can't see, I can't read, I'm using reading glasses.
Tell everybody exactly what the SHU is, how big it is, how much light there is, exactly what the routine is, and you were there for 6 months. Tell us.
Right. It's your basic, what they call 6x9, right? It has a combination toilet sink, right? So the toilet kind of jets out in front of the sink. In this particular SHU, they actually had a shower. There's some SHUs that they don't have a shower. They'll have like in Atlanta, you want to go to the shower. It was Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then you would exchange clothes on Mondays and Wednesdays. And I was like, well, that don't make sense. Why can't we exchange clothes at the same time we're showering?
Yeah.
But in where I was at, they actually had a shower in the cell. And
was there only a certain time you could use that shower?
Yeah. No, you could use it whenever you wanted to. There was no limit on when you could use it. But in my case, those SHUs are set up for two-man cells, right? So if you were lucky or unlucky, you got a bunkie or a cellmate. And
so it's not solitary then necessarily.
Yeah, it's not like I was in the whole time, in the whole 6 months I was there, there was a whole week that I didn't have anybody to talk to. And, I did find myself kind of talking to myself, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of exercising the vocal cords. But
And tell me about the light situation.
they have these lights that they control, right? So the light, it's a really hard light. I mean, if you were trying to read, and that light's hitting you, it's tough. But they control the switch from the outside. But I've seen some guys that manage to turn the light on and off from inside their room, and I'm watching them. So what they do is they got a magazine, and they'll take a string from their blanket, and they'll tie it to a piece of paper, and they'll shoot it to the side of the door. When that paper hits the ground, they'll pull it in, so the rope's actually above the lock. Then they'll tie a magazine to it, and then they'll pull the magazine up until the magazine hits the switch.
Because the switch is up high, is that what you're saying?
It's outside.
Yeah, the switch is up high. So they kind of have an idea where the switch is, and they'll just keep banging that magazine up until it turns that light on, and then if they want, they'll turn it off.
They got nothing else to do. Why not? Stay at it for a couple hours.
Sometimes I used to just watch them like, how the hell do you think about that one?
And is that the way they communicate as well? You always see these in different prison situations where they're throwing stuff across to each other.
Yeah. They have they call it a fishing line, and so the whole thing on a fishing line is you have to have what's called a car, right? And it's usually batteries that are put in let's say a piece of shampoo. Like they'll sell shampoo in the commissary, and they'll break that shampoo bottle, and they'll flatten it, and they'll put batteries in it. Then they'll tie the string to that battery, and then when they slide that thing under the door, that thing some of them guys can do like 50 feet at a time.
Yeah.
And if they time it right, they can get a guy in another room to take his line and shoot it further on down until they get to the room that they actually want. And once they get there, the person on that end is either going to send them coffee or a magazine or a newspaper. And a lot of times, if you just look out the window, you can see all the communication.
Oh, no way.
And there are no guards monitoring all this?
Oh, well, they only come by when they're when they're counting. Like if you're going to go anywhere, right? They'll count, or they're feeding you, or they're giving you like hygiene, or doing, But there's times when somebody will get caught, let's say reeling a newspaper in, and the CO will see it, and he'll just stomp on the paper and break the line, and now you got a paper stuck in the middle of the floor.
And does whoever's on the other end of that line, are they looking at doing additional time in the shoe?
Oh, no. They know that's just part of the program.
I see.
That's crazy.
They're not. That's just the way they do it. That's kind of how you pass your time.
Now, this all happened in what class of prison? It wasn't minimum security then, was it?
Okay, so I was at a camp which is it's what they call out security, right? And out security just means that there are no fences. After out security, the next lower level is what they call community custody, and that's kind of like what a halfway house is. So where I was at, it was what they call a satellite camp, and that camp, what it did was it maintained the outer perimeters of the more higher security prisons. So, the guys that were mowing the lawns at a U.S. penitentiary were obviously not the guys that were actually at the U.S. These were the guys that were at the camp. So when you get in trouble at a camp, they'll send you to the same shoe that everybody else goes to.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll try not to put you in the same cell with a person that's a higher security. So if you're there and you're what they call campers, they can only put another camper with you.
You won't be with some murderer.
Right. You won't be with a guy that's a medium or a high security. They usually try to keep all those guys together.
So in this case, the shoe, though, it seems like it's like the shoe there is like what is pretty much what sounds like what maximum security is every day.
Yeah. Well, in like even in a penitentiary, those guys they go and they work and they leave their cell and usually in a penitentiary, what they do is they just lock you in your rooms at night.
Right. Okay.
When you get to that level where you're super high security, like what the super maxes are. That's like being in the hole, every day. And I think in a super max, they're only allowed to keep you there for 5 years max, and after that, they gotta bring you down unless you've proven to still be a badass. Then they'll keep you in there. But that's the ultimate cruelty because you don't get to talk to nobody. You don't even get to touch your own mail. They let you read it on a monitor.
That's in a supermax. You're saying if you're in a supermax at all, that's the protocol.
Yeah, that's the protocol. Like John Gotti, he was in a supermax, I think for the first 5 years, and then they took him down a level. I think they took him to one of these medical facilities because I think he had cancer or something. So he didn't actually die in a supermax.
When we see, you mentioned John Gotti, like in Goodfellas, how they're making, fettuccine Alfredo there in Cell Block C and all that crap.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
Okay.
That's not even happening at a camp, which, if all places, that's where it would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I heard some pretty good pizza stories.
Where I was at, I was able to get pizza. It was just the way, it was delivered.
Uh-huh.
Now, what does that mean? That you have to have a guard who's in on it?
There's a lot of guards that are in on it. Lompoc was notorious for that. But when you're at a camp, obviously we have access to regular roads, and there's a lot of guys that actually drive vehicles, and they actually use public roads to get to wherever they're working. So a lot of times what happens is somebody will leave a package at a specific location on the side of the road, and that guy will just happen to stop by, pick it up, and bring it back.
No, there you go. Yeah. So your journey through the correctional system, it sounds as though it started, maybe you can take me through it, but here, I'll tell you what I'm getting in this snapshot. It started in one place, went to another place, and through these different contours of 20 years, you experienced different levels of security and also different prisons?
Yes. There are, like when I first went in, I was expecting the worst, right? I was, the worst that you see on television, that's what I was expecting. And, where I first went, it was far from it. But there are those prisons that are exactly like they are seen on television. And, the thing about the feds is that when you behave, not according to the way you're supposed to, the way the feds usually punish you is they'll send you to the furthest place away from your family, right? So, like I happened to be in Arizona, right? Because that's when after I got in trouble, that's where they sent me to, Arizona. And in Arizona, I ran into a lot of dudes that were from Puerto Rico, which means that if you're that far away from Florida, that means that you got into trouble, and they felt that the trouble you got into warranted sending you all the way across the country. So that's why, to me, I think that a lot of guys that want to stay close to home, they tend to behave themselves because they don't want to get shipped all over the place. They call that diesel therapy.
Oh, my God. That's
wow.
funny.
By the way, the temperature in these places, is it controlled at all? I mean, when you said Arizona, I thought, oh, my God, that's probably like 107 inside.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the units that I were in they had air conditioning. They were nice and cool. But, when you walk out and it's like 117 degrees and people are telling you haven't seen nothing yet. I go, the hell you mean I haven't seen nothing yet? You're talking shit that ain't even in the rule book.
You're going to hate Thursdays, right?
Yeah,
Were there many fights?
You know what? I didn't see actual fighting. And if you heard that there was a fight, you want to go, hey, they're fighting over there, and you want to go over there. You don't want to do that. I was in a unit where a guy got stabbed, right? And, I was new, so I was like, what happened? They go, oh, such and such got stabbed. And I took like a step, and the minute I took that step, the people around me goes, you don't want to go over there. And I stepped back, and then I realized why, because they don't want – here's the thing. You don't want to be a witness to anything, because when they start, doing interviews, the people that know that you were there might think that you said something, right? So it's always best not to be a witness to anything. So this way, when people say, hey, were you there? Nope, I wasn't there.
Yeah, what's
it's
the worst thing?
It's easier.
Something about, like, the worst thing to be in prison is a rat. something like that.
Yeah. It's, that used to be the thing a long time ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when they started coming out with these mandatory minimums, there was such a rat infestation,
Yeah.
right, that you couldn't even tell anymore who. I mean, when I was where I was at in Atlanta, and I'm going to say this because I hate rats anyway, right? The rat infestation was so bad that the rats were actually outnumbering the rest of the population. I mean, I was almost tempted to go, yeah, I told on somebody too, right? But, because there was guys comparing, like, I told on that guy too. I'm like, oh, shit, they're comparing notes.
Right. Wow.
Jeez.
You didn't do the full 20?
Well, I did my full term, but so you get good time, right? So for every year that you're there, if you don't get into trouble, they give you 54 days of good time. So in the end, it works out to be a little less than 85%.
Wow.
So how much good time got wiped off, like when you got in trouble with the CO?
They only took 27 days. Only 27 days. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
but there's been guys that have lost all their good time.
So how long before you exact your revenge on everybody who was involved in this?
You know what? I had to let that go.
Yeah. You did 17 years in one day?
Yep.
I am joking, but I'm amazed by your attitude. It's almost a lightness of spirit. I don't know where it comes from. I'd be so bummed that this was taken from me.
Yeah.
How do you get your head to that place? Is it counseling? Is it meditation? What is it?
Well, I'd like to say that it is some form of meditation, but it's not the conventional meditation, right? So for me, meditation is anything that you can kind of wrap your mind around just to kind of calm you down, right? It could be anything. It could be, like me, I used to iron. There was a time that I would just do a lot of ironing. There was other times where I would just do a lot of sewing, just something with my hands. I found out early on that it wasn't cool to keep holding on to the bitterness and the fact that why is this happening to me? All the bad luck. I had a friend one time. I'm talking to her on the phone, and I was laughing, and she's like, "How could you be laughing?" I go, "Because the alternative is crying."
Yeah.
And so when you come out, do you now have like this feeling that you can handle anything, or does it?
I don't know. I don't know what's anything. I mean,
Right.
There's been guys that have lost loved ones while they were there. I don't know if I could handle that.
Right.
I'm fortunate that my family has always come to visit me, and everybody is healthy. So a lot of times I look at just the things that I have that some people don't have. One of the things that hit me the hardest was when I first started my time. Like I was a month into my time, and I'm watching the news, and this 21-year-old couple, they get killed in a car accident, right? So I was like, wow, I thought I had bad luck, but then I look at these kids, and they never even got a chance to live life. I actually lost a cousin, 21 years old, and he got shot in the heart. And as hard as it was, being that he was my family, I had to say, well, I'm fortunate enough not to have suffered something like that,
Right.
But, I'm the best advice I got when I first went in was the guy told me, look, when you go to prison, you have two options. You're either going to be part of the head or you're going to be part of the tail. So it's all up to you, right? So I took that to mean that everything I tried to do it so that I could be a part of the head, right? I don't want to be a follower. I don't want to be having somebody telling me what to do. So one of the first jobs that I got was as a tutor in the education department, helping guys get their GED.
Oh,
So
nice.
by me doing that, a lot of the guys that actually I helped get their GED, these are guys that were really dangerous on the street, and they used to come to me and thank me for helping them, because a lot of times I'd help them even though it wasn't class time. It'd be like we'd be in the middle of the yard. It's like, hey, I got a question. So I helped them, and so by me helping them, they all knew that I was a good dude. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
So no matter where I went, when I finally went into the industry, the factory, I tried to get a job that kind of put me toward the top. You know, I got a job as a production planner or QA, and, you know, I always strive to learn, right? So my whole experience in prison was to make sure that if once I leave there, I leave better than what I came in. And if I don't, then that was 17 years down the drain.
When you apply for a job, does the fact that you have to state that you're a felon, what's the impact that it has on the job search?
Well, I haven't stated it for a couple of reasons. Number one is when people search my background, nothing comes up because my conviction happened 20 years ago, right? So most searches are done for like the last 10 years.
Oh.
Okay, so sometimes it all depends. Like I worked with a guy, and I told him, I go, look, you know, I just got out, and if that's an issue, you know, it's fine. But I'm honest with them when we go into the interview. But so far, I haven't really had to like tell anybody. You know, I kind of let my interview speak for itself. My resume, my resume says Unicor, and a lot of people don't even know what that means. You know,
And Unicor is the name of the sort of prison industrial complex?
It's a corporation that's under the Department of Justice. So even the staff actually could say that they work Unicor, right?
Right.
You know, I could change it and go, you know, I work for the Department of Justice, right? Because technically that's who we were working for.
Right.
So when I start telling them about what skills I have, and I start talking the lingo, that I know what I'm talking about. But like I said, I haven't had a rejection in those jobs that I had because of that.
Well, listen, thank you so much for talking to us. I mean, we have this sort of, or I do anyway, have this sort of sideline curiosity, like what's it like to actually be in that rough and tumble game, the rough and tumble game of the justice system, which you gave us a sense of, and then you have to go through the rough and tumble of the correctional system, and we appreciate the sense you gave of that. Really hope that, you know, it all works out for the rest of your life, man. You sound like a really cool guy.
Well, thank you, and, you know, I'm just trying to keep it positive.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks for
All
being
right,
here.
you're welcome.
Really seemed like a cool guy. God, you kind of hope for a roommate like that if you're going to go
I
in.
know,
huh?
right? Well, that's what it ended up being. They were workout partners for 4 years, and
Your inmate boyfriend and this guy, Jeff, were workout partners.
He's an outmate now.
he's an outmate.
Yep.
But what's crazy is your workout buddy is like your best friend.
Right.
You know,
I know mine is.
Because you work out for like 6 hours.
Right.
You
Sure.
know?
Why the hell not?
So after 4 years of 6 hours, you know, a day, or
Right.
you know, roughly anyway, you get to know someone real
Like
well.
the person in your cubicle.
It is. It's like your bunkie.
He sounds like he's not a big guy, is he, or not?
Oh, he was huge.
Oh, is that right?
I mean, he's like
Like,
shoulders were just like
No, I'm
massive.
sure.
Yeah.
But I'm
6 hours a day.
yeah, I'm sure he's a tank. But he seemed like 5'8" is where I'm going to put him.
Yeah, I think he's right about there.
Wow.
5'8",
Yeah.
5'9".
It's weird. I
Could
don't
be
know.
like, that's a good carnival barker sort of thing to do. Guess your height by your voice. Pick something off the top shelf if I miss.
All right, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Heather, for the connection through your guy.
Sure.
Yeah, bring the best people on.
I would recommend that everybody. Yeah.
Stay out of trouble.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Oh, okay. Let me just, It's just something. There we go. Yeah. I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. And if you haven't already, why don't you show your support and subscribe? What's the matter with you? Go to Edge Show. Oh, it's Edge Dash. What's with the dash? Stupid. All right, I want to thank you for all the ways that you support my friends on the Edge podcast. Show your support and leave something on their website, edge-show.com. Stupid. Why is there a dash?
If you like The Edge, help us out by liking us on Facebook, subscribe on iTunes or on Stitcher.
edge-show.com.
edge-show.com.